Stanley Donwood, Robert Macfarlane, welcome to Waterstones.
Hello, Martha Greengrass.
We're here to talk about Ness, which is one of the most wonderfully strange books I think I have ever come across in my entire 15 years of book selling.
Wow.
But it is wonderfully strange. And I wanted to start by asking how you talked about it to each other as an idea, as a project. How have you been discussing it?
That's a very good question. I can't remember the genesis of this at all.
We swam.
We swam.
We swam.
We talked about it in the sea. But why were we talking about it?
Well, I've been going to Orford Ness, which is the unnamed landscape at the origin of this book, for nearly 20 years now, and nowhere has drawn me back more and more often. And it is a place of strangeness and weirdness and unsettlingness and all sorts of other nesses. And Stanley lives on a Ness,
Yes, yeah.
part of each year.
And I'm from East Anglia, so when I was a kid, I was really keen on castles. So my parents took me to Orford Castle, which was an early military structure, and I really strongly remember seeing this island that in those days was forbidden. It was a secret island, so no one could go there. And there were these strange structures, like sort of ziggurats on legs, that you could see across towards the sea in this sort of grey light of the East Anglian coast.
Oh, strange. And when you're there as a place, because I haven't ever been there, what is it like to be there? It's clearly inspiring for both of you, but I just wanted to get a sense of the feel of that place.
I mean, for me, it's haunting because it is where a willful natural presence, powerful natural presence of the sea, but also of hares, the size of deers, of short ears, owls, of shingle moving and shifting in storms, collides with a history of British militarism. So for 70 years, 1913 to 1983, the Ness was where the British government carried out secret military tests, everything from rifle ballistics in the First World War to atomic weapons, environmental testing, so detonators, centrifuges, casings, etc. They were all tested there. So it's a place of death and a place of life, I guess.
And the whole coast there it's friable. It's where the land meets the water, and you're never quite sure which one is. They're vying for primacy in a way. So Orford, the town, you reach by going through this enormous forest that until the end of the Cold War was home to USAF long-range bombers, nuclear weapons, and you reach the village of Orford, which was a very important medieval town, until the sea spread a long tongue of shingle across the harbour, which grew and grew and grew. Longshore Drift became Orford Ness. Became this untrue island.
I think reading the book, it does draw you into this landscape and give you a very strong sense of it. And I was aware when I was looking at the images in the book, the thing that struck me was this sense of a vanishing point. A lot of these images are drawing you kind of away and kind of into the distance, and they're quite.
The first thing I did on each picture was to draw the horizon.
Really?
Which is exactly the same horizon on every picture.
Oh.
So it's always two thirds of the picture is land and a third is sky.
So that's fascinating, and it's a very. It seemed to me that both in terms of the kind of prose and the image, it's very. The human is very removed from it in some ways. That it's kind of drawing you from kind of human environment into something that has all sorts of other things creeping into it. Was that a conscious kind of something consciously that as you were writing it you were aware of?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, there are these human presences, principally the armourer, this great sort of technocratic, managerial, death-dreaming figure who, maybe has some contemporary echoes, but is also a version of a militarised man and power that has been present since Beowulf, since Gawain and the Green Knight, since every story we've told, really. And then against that person, that force, come becomes nature and its lively, versatile, more than human forces. But very strange sort of superheroes, these 5 he, she, they, as and it that gradually come to take over at the Green Chapel, the site of the laboratory of the book, really, of the theatre of war, if you like, is in the Green Chapel.
Yeah.
There's the organic encroaching on the mechanistic. Somehow the idea of the landscape being used for these aggressive, nefarious sort of purposes, and then in the end there isn't anything to stop these forces, the forces of nature, from doing whatever nature wishes to do.
But that takes time.
Yes.
And in a sense we're living through a phase now where we don't have that time for recovery, for overwhelm. In fact, I think it is a sort of dream, or a bad dream, born out of the last years of crisis, of anxiety.
Fever dream of the Anthropocene, as you call it.
Fever dream of the Anthropocene.
Yes.
I don't know if that comes across. Or
I think it does. Yes, I think it really does, and I think there is a sense of the kind of nuclear testing side of that history and that threat coming up against the current climactic sort of threats that we're under. I mean,
nuclear fear was the climate change of the 1980s for most of the formative years. I don't think the term global warming was bandied about at all until the mid 80s. Nuclear winter was the thing, and it was very present in East Anglia, because that was where all of the flat land was for all of the airfields for the limited nuclear theatre. It was a serious policy to have a contained war using what we call tactical nuclear weapons in the European theatre.
It struck me. I was thinking about Nether, the image that was used as the cover for your book, Underland, and the fact that there is that same juxtaposition there of people of what is something, the it's nuclear pretty flare, and that people go, isn't this a beautiful sunset, and that you've got that same, and I thought I think that's there in both of your work, that sense of marrying up things that are kind of beautiful.
Well, Robert was asking about using that picture for Underland, and I was like, why? But then, when I read the book, I see, because it does make perfect sense with the opening and closing of Underland.
But is that something that you see around you, and when you're thinking about creating art and literature work, that sense of being able to see those two things in parallel around you all the time, that things that are terrifying and horrifying and also beautiful.
I think that's one reason why Orford Ness particularly is central. It has become a sort of Tinton Abbey for the contemporary. It's become this site of ruination, of violent histories, saturating landscapes, of terrible futures postponed but not necessarily cancelled, but all also folded through with this strange vitality of the living world, which is in many ways neutral and indifferent to our schemes, but which we've increasingly made restless, folded into our geological projects, our military projects, and so Orford Ness becomes this metonym for a state that we are now in. It is a place of clash and crisis and juxtaposition, and that's what makes it so eerie for me in a very modern sense.
And there is something sort of deeply mythological about this book, and I wondered whether, in the face of where the planet is now, whether you think we need new mythologies and new kind of ways of looking at and discussing the world.
I don't think it can hurt. There are very many things we need more urgently, but I think this sort of a kind of more, as you say, a mythology, I suppose, a modern mythology, a way of making sense of something which is, there is no sense that can be taken from the current situation. So I don't know whether.
Well, I think
whether this is this a sort of symptom
Yeah, I think
This-
it's a symptom. If the fever dream is a symptom, and this is the book about which I've known least of all the books I've written. It is mysterious. I said somewhere that Beowulf and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight are both really about men going out to sort of kill the wild, if you like. Gawain goes to behead the Green Man, Beowulf and the Geats go out to kill the wild things of the moor and the lake. These are not stories we need now, but they're embedded deep and early in culture. And so yes, I think retellings in which forms of power and forms of organisation that have got us into the situation we're in now are
It's an inverted pyramid of power, whereas you had this like a powerful man going out to subdue the wild nature, and then to invert that now seems to make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because that is what has to be done if there's going to be any semblance of a future for this species on this planet.
There are some
Cheery
jokes.
notes.
There are some jokes. There are some jokes in the book, and I just wanted to ask you briefly about collaboration as well, because it's something that seems to you've both collaborated a lot during your careers, and I just wondered what it was for each of you that you find particularly inspiring about working with other people, not just on your own.
I'm just awed by other people's specialisms. I feel like I have a mini sort of half specialism of being able to put words sort of in an order, and that's it. I can't draw, I can't sing, I can't dance, and I definitely can't make music. And so when I work with people like Stanley's talent and vision, or musicians, or of artists, photographers, it just amazes me. And then it becomes this very vibrant. I could never have written this book on my own. It was years of swimming, talking, stalling, getting stuck, and kind of coming back to Stanley.
Other things getting in the way.
Yeah. So for me, it's a thrilling kind of energy circuit that fizzes away.
Yeah, I like working with other people, because I have very little faith in my own work. So it's kind of, if I get somebody else involved, it's not just my fault. It's someone I could share the blame.
That's how it is, isn't it?
I was thinking more about Radiohead, to be honest, if you like.
And it's probably good you're finding this out now. And then my last question was really that I think when I started reading Ness, I was quite overwhelmed by the sense of this crisis that is there, and I think my thoughts were probably quite dark, I think, in the initial pages. But as I got through, as I got through it, and kind of worked my way into it, and I did find that by the end of it there was another strand that was alongside that, and it was a sense of there being a kind of hope in there as well, and I wondered whether for you both, whether you see this as a hopeful book, and indeed whether you have hope for the future, or how you feel about our prospects.
I'll pass on that. Let Rob come up with something.
Well, the five forces, the five figures, I find them. I wanted to make them with kind of beauty and awe. They're not human. They're all that is extraordinary in the more than human world. Fungi and currents and creatures and wood and birds, all collaborating in this great project of being. So there is a hope in that, and eventually they convert the armourer. They do convert the armourer. But the bigger hope question, I feel that we know better than we ever have before what we need to do, and we have less time and in a sense less possibility in which to do it. So we're sort of half the way there in terms of the visions, but the futures remain dark.
There's a concerning direction of travel.
I think I would agree with you, but I think I am also very glad that there are books like this out in the world. As you say, we have more pressing things perhaps to do, but I think this is important, and it is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So
Thank you
both very much.
Great.
Thank you very much.